The five-star Hotel Palacio Real in central Madrid was renowned for its impeccable service, luxurious accommodations, and discretion in serving high-profile clientele from around the world. With its marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and staff trained to anticipate every need of their distinguished guests, it represented the pinnacle of Spanish hospitality and had hosted everyone from heads of state to international celebrities without incident. Tonight, however, the hotel's reputation for professionalism was about to be tested by the prejudices of its management and the moral courage of one of its most famous guests. Cristiano Ronaldo had arranged to meet his new tactical coach, Dr. Khalil Al-Mansouri, at the hotel's restaurant to discuss strategy for the upcoming season. Dr. Al-Mansouri was a brilliant football mind who had earned his doctorate in sports science from Oxford University and had successfully coached teams across Europe and the Middle East. His innovative approaches to player development and tactical analysis had made him one of the most sought-after coaches in international football, and Ronaldo had specifically requested that Real Madrid hire him to work with the team's attacking players. The arrangement was that Dr. Al-Mansouri would stay at the Hotel Palacio Real during his visits to Madrid, with all expenses covered by the club as part of his consulting agreement. Ronaldo arrived at the hotel first and was warmly greeted by the staff, who knew him well from his frequent visits. He was escorted to a private dining room where he waited for Dr. Al-Mansouri, reviewing tactical notes and looking forward to what he expected would be a productive working dinner. The two men had developed a strong professional relationship over the past few months, with Dr. Al-Mansouri's insights helping Ronaldo refine aspects of his game that had led to some of his best performances of the season. Dr. Al-Mansouri arrived at the hotel shortly after Ronaldo, approaching the reception desk with the confidence of someone accustomed to international travel and professional accommodations. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, carried himself with the bearing of an educated professional, and presented his reservation confirmation and identification to the desk clerk with the expectation of routine service. Instead, what he encountered was a level of scrutiny and suspicion that immediately marked him as unwelcome. The desk clerk, a young man named Carlos, looked at Dr. Al-Mansouri's passport with obvious skepticism, studying the document far longer than necessary while making no effort to hide his suspicion. Dr. Khalil Al-Mansouri, Carlos read aloud, his pronunciation deliberately awkward and his tone suggesting that the name itself was problematic. "And you're here for business?" "Yes, I'm working with Real Madrid as a tactical consultant," Dr. Al-Mansouri replied patiently, accustomed to additional scrutiny when traveling, but hoping it would be brief. "I have a reservation that was arranged by the club, and I'm expected at a dinner meeting in your restaurant." Carlos continued studying the documents while making phone calls that seemed designed more to create delay than to verify legitimate information. Other hotel guests were being served quickly and efficiently, but Dr. Al-Mansouri found himself waiting as the minutes passed and his scheduled meeting time approached. After nearly 15 minutes of unnecessary bureaucracy, the hotel manager, Elena Varga, emerged from her office to address what Carlos had apparently described as a situation. Varga was a woman in her 50s who had built her career in luxury hospitality, but whose ideas about appropriate clientele seemed frozen in an earlier, less enlightened era. She approached Dr. Al-Mansouri with a forced smile that barely concealed her obvious displeasure at his presence. "Mr. Al-Mansouri," she said, deliberately omitting his doctoral title, "I'm afraid there's been some confusion with your reservation. It appears that the credit authorization from Real Madrid hasn't been processed properly, and we're unable to accommodate you this evening." Dr. Al-Mansouri looked puzzled, knowing that his arrangements had been handled by the club's travel office with the same efficiency they used for all team personnel. "Perhaps there's been a miscommunication," he suggested diplomatically. "Could you contact the club's travel coordinator? I have her direct number if that would be helpful." "I'm afraid our policy doesn't allow us to make external calls to verify payment arrangements," Varga replied, though anyone familiar with luxury hotel operations would know this was nonsense. "However, I'd be happy to recommend several other establishments that might be more suitable for your needs." The coded language was unmistakable to everyone present. Dr. Al-Mansouri was being refused service not because of any legitimate problem with his reservation, but because his Middle Eastern name and appearance had triggered the hotel management's prejudices about appropriate clientele for their establishment. Other guests in the lobby were beginning to notice the commotion, and several were clearly uncomfortable with what they were witnessing. Dr. Al-Mansouri maintained his composure despite the obvious humiliation, but the injustice of the situation was becoming increasingly apparent to everyone present. "I understand your position," he said with dignity that contrasted sharply with the hotel staff's behavior, "but I should mention that I'm here for a business meeting with Cristiano Ronaldo, who is expecting me in your restaurant momentarily." At the mention of Ronaldo's name, both Carlos and Varga exchanged glances that suggested they hadn't anticipated this complication. They had assumed they were dealing with an ordinary guest who could be quietly turned away without consequences, not someone whose presence was connected to one of their most valuable clients. "Perhaps we could arrange for you to meet Mr. Ronaldo in the lobby," Varga suggested, clearly hoping to minimize the situation without actually resolving the underlying problem. "I'm sure he would understand that accommodation issues sometimes arise." It was at this moment that Ronaldo himself appeared in the lobby, having grown concerned when Dr. Al-Mansouri failed to arrive at their scheduled meeting time. He immediately assessed the situation, taking in Dr. Al-Mansouri's frustrated expression, the defensive postures of the hotel staff, and the attention their conversation was drawing from other guests. His expression darkened as he realized what was happening. "Khalil," Ronaldo said warmly, approaching his colleague with a greeting that made their professional relationship obvious to everyone present. "I was wondering where you were. Is everything all right?" Dr. Al-Mansouri looked at Ronaldo with a mixture of relief and embarrassment. "I'm afraid there seems to be some confusion with my reservation. The hotel management is suggesting that payment authorization from Real Madrid hasn't been processed properly." Ronaldo turned to face Varga, his expression shifting from confusion to barely controlled anger as he understood the true nature of the confusion. "Elena," he said, his voice carrying a dangerous calm that hotel staff had never heard from him before. "Dr. Al-Mansouri is here as my guest and as a consultant to Real Madrid. His accommodations were arranged through the same process we use for all team personnel. What exactly is the problem?" Varga realized she was now in an impossible position, caught between her prejudices and her recognition that alienating Ronaldo would be professionally catastrophic. "Mr. Ronaldo, there's been a misunderstanding. We're simply following standard verification procedures for all guests." "Standard procedures?" Ronaldo's voice was now loud enough to carry throughout the lobby, drawing the attention of every guest and staff member present. "Carlos, show me the verification procedures you used for the last 5 guests who checked in tonight. I want to see exactly how much time you spent studying their passports and making phone calls to confirm their reservations." Carlos looked panicked, realizing that his discriminatory behavior was now under scrutiny from someone who couldn't be dismissed or ignored. "Sir, each guest's situation is unique, and we—" "Stop," Ronaldo interrupted, his voice cutting through Carlos's attempt at explanation. "Just stop. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending this is about verification procedures. Dr. Al-Mansouri is being treated differently because he's from the Middle East, because his name sounds foreign to you, because you've decided he doesn't look like the kind of person who belongs in your hotel." The lobby had now fallen completely silent except for Ronaldo's voice, which carried clearly to every corner of the space. Other guests were watching the confrontation with fascination and growing support for Ronaldo's position, while hotel staff looked increasingly uncomfortable with the situation their colleagues had created. "Let me tell you something about the man you're trying to refuse service to," Ronaldo continued, his voice growing stronger and more passionate. "Dr. Al-Mansouri has a doctorate from Oxford University. He speaks 6 languages fluently. He's coached winning teams on 3 continents. He's forgotten more about football tactics than most people ever learn. But apparently, none of that matters to you because he was born in the wrong country and has the wrong name." Varga made one final attempt to salvage the situation without admitting fault. "Mr. Ronaldo, please understand that we're simply trying to follow our policies." "Your policies?" Ronaldo's voice now carried an edge of contempt that silenced any further protests. "Let me ask you something, Elena. How many of your policies are designed to exclude people based on their nationality or religion? How many of your standard procedures just happen to create more obstacles for Middle Eastern guests than for European ones?" He looked around the lobby, addressing not just the hotel staff but the other guests who were witnessing the confrontation. "This hotel markets itself as a place of international hospitality, but what I'm seeing tonight is discrimination disguised as professionalism. What I'm seeing is prejudice dressed up as policy. What I'm seeing is exactly the kind of thinking that makes talented people like Dr. Al-Mansouri feel unwelcome in places where they should be celebrated." Ronaldo turned back to Varga, his voice becoming quieter but more intense. "Elena, I want you to think very carefully about what happens next. Dr. Al-Mansouri is going to be accommodated in your finest suite, with every amenity your hotel offers, and he's going to be treated with the respect and professionalism that any distinguished guest deserves. Or I'm going to walk out of here right now, and I'm going to make sure that everyone knows exactly why I will never set foot in this establishment again." The threat was clear and devastating. Ronaldo's business and recommendation were worth millions of euros to the hotel, and his public criticism would damage their reputation far beyond any immediate financial loss. But more than that, his moral authority in the situation was absolute, and everyone present understood that he was fighting for principles that transcended business considerations. Varga's capitulation was immediate and complete. "Of course, Mr. Ronaldo, there's obviously been a terrible misunderstanding. Dr. Al-Mansouri, please accept our sincerest apologies. We'll have you checked into our presidential suite immediately, and all services will be complimentary to make up for this unfortunate confusion." But Ronaldo wasn't finished. "Elena, this isn't over with a room upgrade and an apology. I want to know what you're going to do to ensure that other guests don't face the same discrimination that Dr. Al-Mansouri experienced tonight. I want to know what training your staff will receive to prevent this kind of incident from happening again." The conversation that followed was a masterclass in using influence for social justice. Ronaldo insisted that the hotel implement comprehensive anti-discrimination training for all staff, establish clear protocols for handling complaints about biased treatment, and create oversight mechanisms to ensure that policies were applied consistently, regardless of guests' backgrounds. He also demanded that Carlos, who had initiated the discriminatory treatment, be suspended pending a review of his conduct. As Dr. Al-Mansouri was finally escorted to his accommodations with the level of service that should have been provided from the beginning, Ronaldo made one final statement to the assembled lobby full of guests and staff. "Tonight you've seen something that happens to good people every day, usually without witnesses and usually without consequences. Dr. Al-Mansouri is fortunate that he has colleagues who will stand up for him, but most people facing discrimination don't have that protection. Each of us has a responsibility to speak out when we see injustice, regardless of whether it affects us personally." The incident became a turning point for the Hotel Palacio Real, which was forced to confront the reality that its culture of exclusivity had created an environment where discrimination could flourish. The anti-discrimination measures that Ronaldo insisted upon became a model for other luxury hotels throughout Spain, and the incident sparked broader conversations about bias in the hospitality industry. Dr. Al-Mansouri, despite the initial humiliation, became a regular guest at the hotel and eventually developed a positive relationship with the reformed staff. But he would always remember that evening as an example of how individual courage in confronting injustice could create changes that benefited countless others who might face similar treatment. Years later, when Dr. Al-Mansouri was interviewed about his successful coaching career and his work promoting diversity in football, he would always mention that night at the Hotel Palacio Real as a defining moment in his understanding of how important it was for people with influence to use their platforms to defend those who were being treated unfairly. and Ronaldo would continue to stay at the hotel, not because the incident had been resolved to his satisfaction, but because he wanted to ensure that the changes they had implemented were maintained and that other guests from diverse backgrounds felt welcome in a place that had learned to value inclusion over exclusivity.